a brave gnome with the keenest eye, a loyal shrub with the sharpest wit, and a merry tune carried on the wind. Milo and Gooseberry blazed the trails again. Milo Pierce, accompanied by his trusty awakened shrub companion, Gooseberry, the clever and daring trailblazer who leads the way for discovery and adventure in the uncharted wilderness. Return with us now to those thrilling journeys of yore. Milo and Gooseberry ride the trails once more.
Milo and Gooseberry walked into Cedar Ridge at dusk. The village was quiet. Too quiet, thought Milo. He glanced at Gooseberry, who rustled his leaves as if to say he agreed. People were gathered in the square, standing around, whispering. It wasn't the usual kind of standing around. They were worried. Milo and Gooseberry made their way to the center, where they saw a woman speaking to a group of men. She saw them and waved them over. "You two look like you're not from around here," she said. Milo nodded. "We just came in from the wildlands. Name's Milo Pierce, and this here is Gooseberry. We've been traveling, and we heard folks here are having some trouble." The woman introduced herself as Eliza Harper, a local farmer. She explained about the goats that had gone missing from the farms around Cedar Ridge. No sign of struggle, just goats that disappeared in the night. Milo listened, nodding. He looked at Gooseberry, who tilted his leafy head and nodded in return. "Show us where it happened," Milo said. Eliza led them to her farm. It was getting dark now, and the fields were shadowed under the trees that lined them. She brought them to the pen where her goats had been taken. Milo looked around, his sharp eyes catching details. There were footprints in the dirt, and he noticed something strange, ashes mixed in with the prints. He knelt and rubbed the soil between his fingers. "Magic," Gooseberry murmured, his voice low. Milo looked up at Eliza. "Do you know of anyone who might want to take your goats? Any troublemakers around here?" Eliza shook her head. "Not around here, no. But there's Briarwood Thicket. People say strange things happen there, especially at night." Milo stood up and dusted his hands. "We'll take a look." He looked at Gooseberry, who sighed and shook his branches. "Come on, partner. Adventure calls." They made their way to Briarwood Thicket. The forest was dark, the air heavy and still. Gooseberry moved cautiously, his branches brushing aside low-hanging vines. Milo moved ahead, quick and light on his feet, his eyes scanning the shadows. They saw snares set along the way, traps meant to catch anything wandering through. Milo pointed them out, and they avoided them, moving deeper into the forest. The deeper they went, the more they could feel something wrong. Gooseberry paused and put his branch hand on Milo's shoulder. "The forest is restless," he said. "Something is here that doesn't belong." Milo nodded. They kept moving until they came to a clearing. There was a dim glow ahead, and they crouched low. Through the leaves, Milo saw what they had been looking for. A camp. Pens built hastily, filled with goats. And men standing guard, their shadows long in the firelight. Milo looked at Gooseberry, who nodded. Milo crept closer, keeping low, moving silently. Gooseberry stayed back, watching, waiting for the signal. Milo slipped into the camp, moving between the shadows, staying out of sight. He reached the pens, finding the lock on the gate. He drew his tools, careful not to make a sound. He could hear the thieves talking, their voices low, their words gruff. They were planning to move the goats soon, to sell them off. The lock clicked, and Milo pushed the gate open. The goats stirred but stayed quiet, as if they knew not to make a sound. Milo moved to the next pen, unlocking it. He could hear footsteps, someone approaching. He ducked behind the pen, holding his breath. A man stepped into view, a tall figure with a scar down his cheek. He was the leader, Cassian Voss, Milo guessed. Voss looked at the pens, then turned his head, his eyes narrowing. He must have sensed something, because he drew his dagger and stepped closer. Milo held still, his eyes on the dagger. He reached for his own weapon, ready, but then he heard the sound. A soft rustling, like wind through leaves. Gooseberry's magic. Vines sprang from the earth, wrapping around Voss's legs, pulling him back. Voss cursed, slashing at the vines, but they held tight. Milo took his chance. He moved to the pen and swung it open, waving the goats out. They moved quickly, quietly, slipping past the distracted guards, heading for the woods. Milo followed, keeping low, making his way back to Gooseberry. The camp was in chaos now. Gooseberry had summoned a fog, thick and blinding, and the thieves stumbled, their shouts muffled. Milo reached Gooseberry, and they led the goats through the forest, moving fast, the fog covering their escape. They reached the edge of the forest, where the local rangers were waiting. Eliza had warned them. The rangers moved in, taking the thieves by surprise, capturing them without a fight. Back in Cedar Ridge, the villagers gathered in the square, cheering as the goats were returned. Eliza hugged Milo, her eyes bright with gratitude. "You did it," she said. "Thank you." Milo smiled, shaking his head. "We just did what had to be done." Gooseberry stood beside him, his leaves rustling softly. "The forest is at peace again," he said. The villagers offered them food and supplies, and Milo and Gooseberry accepted gratefully. As they prepared to leave, a small child ran up to them, her eyes wide with wonder. "Where are you going next?" she asked. Milo knelt down, smiling. "Wherever the wind takes us," he said. He stood, looking at Gooseberry. "Ready, partner?" Gooseberry nodded. "Always." They set off down the road, the sun rising over the hills, the promise of another adventure ahead of them. Together, they walked on, ready for whatever the wildlands would throw their way next.
And so, Milo Pierce and his loyal shrub companion Gooseberry ride off once more, blazing trails and forging friendships across the uncharted wilderness. Until next time, keep your wits sharp, your mind open, and your heart true, and you just might hear the scout's tune carried on the wind.